Obedience is not a virtue. We're taking a long, careful look at the Most Dangerous Superstition by Larken Rose, and we're focusing on the opening arguments that set the whole thing in motion. This isn't light reading or quick sound bites. We're going to sit with these ideas, turn them over, test them against every common objection you might have, and see where pure logic takes us. Picture this for a second. What if the biggest source of human misery across history wasn't random cruelty or some flaw in human nature, but one single belief that almost every person alive has accepted as obvious truth? What if that belief makes otherwise decent people cheer for things they would never do themselves? And what if letting go of it doesn't lead to chaos but actually opens the door to real peace and cooperation? That's the territory we're exploring today. No hype, no slogans, just straight reasoning from the ground up. If this hits you deep, those raw historical truths or those light bulb moments, drop a comment, tell a friend, and stick around for more. Let's get right into the heart of it. The first core argument is that the belief in authority, including every form of belief in government, stands as the most dangerous superstition humanity has ever held. Not greed, not hatred, not some vague cultural decay. This one idea. Rose lays it out plainly. Look through any history of man's inhumanity to man, and the overwhelming pattern isn't people breaking rules. It's people enforcing rules. It's obedience in the name of some higher power called authority that turns ordinary folks into participants in theft, assault, imprisonment, and killing on a massive scale. The evils done despite authority are tiny compared to the evils done because of it. And here's the twist that hits hard. We were all raised to think authority creates order and justice, that respecting it is what makes us civilized. But the opposite is true. Real respect for humanity and real respect for authority cannot coexist. One demands you see every person as a sovereign equal. The other demands you accept that some people have a special moral license to control the rest. Now, the second argument builds straight on that foundation and nails down what authority actually means. It is not just force. Force exists everywhere. A bully uses force. A robber uses force. What separates authority from any other thug is the widespread belief that certain people possess the moral right to rule. Not the ability, the right. Their commands become laws. Disobeying them becomes crime. Paying them becomes taxation instead of extortion. Suddenly the same acts that would horrify us if done by a neighbor become noble and necessary when done by the designated rulers. This isn't semantics. It's the key distinction. Street gangs command obedience through fear alone. People comply because they have to. With authority, people comply because they believe they should. They feel a duty. They wear the label of law-abiding citizen like a badge of honor. That shift in perception is everything. Without it, the whole machine grinds to a halt. The third argument is the one that feels like a cold glass of water to the face after the first two. Authority and government do not exist. They never have. They never will. The politicians are real. The buildings and the enforcers are real. The guns and the prisons are real. But the supposed moral right that makes any of it legitimate is pure fiction. A superstition. Remove that one imagined right and what you have left is simply a very large, very organized gang of thieves and controllers. Nothing more. All the rituals, the elections, the debates about what the law should be, they all rest on a premise that one person can acquire the right to rule another. That premise is false. It is logically impossible. You cannot give someone a right you do not yourself possess. No vote, no constitution, no ancient document can magically create it. Therefore, the entire conversation about how authority should be used or improved is as pointless as arguing how Santa Claus should deliver presents. It assumes something that isn't there. Let's sit with that for a moment and destroy the usual pushback with nothing but raw logic. The most common objection is that we need authority because humans are flawed. Without rulers, the argument goes, we would descend into constant violence and every man for himself chaos. But think about what that claim actually says. It says that because people are untrustworthy and dangerous, we should take a subset of those same untrustworthy people, hand them a badge and a title, and suddenly their flaws disappear and their violence becomes righteous. That is not a solution. That is rearranging the same dangerous elements and pretending the rearrangement fixes the danger. If humans are too imperfect to govern themselves, they are certainly too imperfect to govern everyone else. The belief in authority does not correct human flaws. It amplifies them by removing the one check that actually works: personal conscience and personal responsibility. When someone acts under orders from authority, they no longer have to wrestle with whether the act is right. They only have to ask whether it is legal. That is the opposite of moral progress. It is moral surrender. Another frequent counter is the idea of consent. People say the governed consent to be ruled, either explicitly through voting or implicitly by living in a certain place. But consent cannot be given on behalf of someone else. I cannot consent for you to be robbed. A majority cannot consent for a minority to be controlled. And the notion of implied consent is even weaker. Living on land that some politicians have declared theirs does not mean you agreed to their rules any more than driving on a road means you agreed to let a carjacker take your vehicle. True consent is mutual, voluntary, and revocable. Authority by its nature is none of those things. It claims the right to force compliance even when consent is explicitly withdrawn. That is not consent. That is conquest wearing nicer clothes. Then there is the practical objection that some things simply require authority. Roads, defense, dispute resolution. Without it, who would build anything or protect anyone? But this objection confuses organization with coercion. People already cooperate on massive scales without authority every single day. Markets coordinate millions of voluntary choices into complex supply chains that deliver food, medicine, and technology with astonishing efficiency. Defense does not require a special right to rule. Every individual already has the right to defend himself and to join with others who share that goal. The moment you add the claimed right to force everyone else to participate or obey, you have stopped defending and started dominating. History shows that the largest acts of aggression have always come from the very institutions sold to us as protectors. The belief in authority does not solve coordination problems. It creates the biggest coordination problem of all. How do we stop the coordinators from becoming tyrants? Even the objection that authority is a necessary evil collapses under scrutiny. An evil that is necessary would still be evil. But more importantly, authority is not necessary. It is imaginary. You cannot need something that cannot exist in the first place. Santa Claus is not necessary for Christmas. He is not real. The same logic applies here. The functions people imagine authority performs can and do happen through voluntary cooperation and mutual self-interest. What authority uniquely adds is the illusion that coercion is legitimate. Remove the illusion and you remove the only thing that ever made widespread, organized oppression possible. These three arguments together form a complete logical chain. The belief causes the harm. The belief is about a supposed moral right, and that right does not and cannot exist. Once you see it, the entire framework of politics starts to look like theater performed over an empty stage. Debates about which party should hold power, which laws should be passed, which programs should be funded, all of it becomes pointless because the foundational premise is false. It is like two people arguing over how the magic pixie dust should be distributed when there is no magic pixie dust. Let me share some of the clearest lines from the book that drive these points home. On the danger of the superstition. The vast majority of suffering and injustice in the world, today and spanning back thousands of years, can be directly attributed to a single idea. Most of the violence, theft, assault, and murder in the world is the result of a mere superstition. On the distinction of authority. It is not merely the ability to forcibly control others, it is the supposed moral right to forcibly control others. And on the non-existence. Government does not exist. It never has and it never will. Without that authority, without the right to do what they do, they are nothing but a gang of thugs. What stays with you after wrestling with these ideas is how cleanly they cut through every justification we have been taught. Authority is not a tool that sometimes goes wrong. It is the wrong tool by definition. It promises order but delivers perpetual conflict dressed up as law. It promises justice but delivers selective aggression dressed up as legislation. It promises protection but delivers the largest protection racket in history. And every time someone says we just need better people in charge or better checks on power, they are missing the point. The problem is not who holds the ring of power. The problem is the ring itself. The very concept of a moral right to rule is what corrupts. It turns good intentions into evil actions and turns ordinary people into both victims and accomplices at the same time. If any of this resonates, if it makes you want to look at the daily headlines with fresh eyes, then the real work begins outside this conversation. Question the assumption that some people were born with extra rights. Question the rituals that claim to create those rights. Question whether obedience has ever been the path to a better world. The book does not hand you a new system to believe in. It hands you the freedom to stop believing in the old one. And that, more than any political reform, is where genuine change starts. Thanks for thinking through this with me today. If these ideas hit you the way they hit me, keep turning them over. Talk about them. Test them. The world does not change because we swap one set of rulers for another. It changes when enough of us stop pretending the rulers were ever legitimate in the first place. I'll catch you next time. Keep questioning. Stay free.